Have you ever wondered what happens when vengeance itself rides into a galaxy where mercy no longer exists? Imagine a universe where a billion souls scream across the void, where gods feed on suffering, and hope is nothing but a fragile ember smothered beneath the heel of endless war. Now imagine that, somewhere within that nightmare, a single flame refuses to die, a flame burning not for glory or conquest, but for retribution. What if that flame was Ghost Rider? Before we dive into this collision of hellfire and heresy, I promise you this: stay with me till the very end, because the revelation that unfolds at the climax of this story will challenge everything you thought you knew about vengeance, sin, and salvation. Our story begins not in the darkness of the warp, nor on the corpse worlds of the Imperium, but in a moment of transition, the instant between death and damnation. Johnny Blaze, the spirit of vengeance, had long grown accustomed to the pull of hellfire under his skin, to the whispers of souls crying for punishment. But one day, the whispers changed. They weren't begging anymore. They were commanding. The flames around him roared to life without warning. He felt the chain in his hand grow hotter than ever before, until it glowed white, trembling as if resisting something unseen. The air thickened, folded in on itself, and the horizon split like torn flesh. Through that rift came screams not of demons, but of something worse, echoes of machine prayers, the hum of starships, and the scent of burning ozone. When Johnny opened his eyes again, he was no longer on Earth. The sky was a bruise of purple and ash, the ground soaked in oil and blood. The sound of artillery shook the air like thunder. Above him, monstrous figures moved through the haze, armored giants with glowing eyes, chanting hymns to an emperor who had not answered in 10,000 years. And then, they saw him. A lone rider, surrounded by fire that no weapon could explain. His skull burned like a cursed sun. His chain dripped molten metal that hissed as it hit the ground. To the Adeptus Astartes who stood before him, he was not a man, he was a daemon. But Ghost Rider wasn't here to serve chaos. He wasn't here to destroy humanity. He was here because something or someone had torn open the barrier between realms and summoned vengeance itself into the far future. As the Space Marines leveled their bolters and the first shots rang out, the rider didn't flinch. His hollow eyes burned brighter. His voice, when it came, was a low growl that cut through the gunfire like judgment itself. Guilty. With that one word, the battlefield ignited. What followed would become a legend whispered across time, the tale of how vengeance entered the 41st millennium, and how even the Emperor's angels of death learned that hell has many faces. But what summoned him here? Was it chaos? Was it the warp itself seeking a new weapon? Or was it something far older, a divine force lost in the void, seeking balance in a galaxy long forsaken? Stay until the end, and you'll discover the horrifying truth behind Ghost Rider's arrival and the fate of those who dared to stand against him. The flames of the first battle still burned across the horizon when the warp began to take notice. To the soldiers of the Imperium, the appearance of the burning Skull Rider was an omen, a daemon of vengeance loosed upon their world. To the Inquisition, it was a heresy that needed to be contained, studied, or destroyed. But to the warp, it was a memory. Because long before mankind reached the stars, before the Emperor rose from obscurity, the warp had already known fire. It had felt the sting of rebellion, the echo of punishment, the agony of souls consumed by their own guilt. And when Ghost Rider entered its domain, the warp did not resist him. It welcomed him. The first night after his arrival, Johnny Blaze found himself standing on a plain of glass and ash. The air shimmered with strange energies. Every breath he took tasted of metal and decay. He didn't know how long he had been there. Time meant nothing in this place, but he felt eyes watching him from beyond the shadows. Then came the whisper. A voice, faint but ancient, coiling like smoke through his mind. You are not the first to burn. He turned, chain coiling around his arm, fire roaring from his skull. Show yourself, he growled. And from the fog emerged a shape tall, regal, and monstrous. Its armor was a shifting tapestry of faces, each one screaming in silence. It carried no weapon, only a staff crowned with a writhing flame. You bear the mark of damnation, the creature hissed. But not of the ruinous powers. Tell me, little spark, who sent you here? Ghost Rider's chain snapped forward, wrapping around the figure's throat. No one sent me. I go where sin calls. The creature didn't struggle. Instead, it smiled. Then you have already heard them, the billions of sinners calling out across the galaxy. Tell me, spirit of vengeance, can you burn an entire universe? The fire in Johnny's eyes flared hotter. He yanked the chain, tearing the figure's head from its body, but as it fell, the ash reformed into a new face, 1,000 new whispers rising in laughter. He was not fighting a man. He was fighting the warp itself. The ground split open beneath his feet, revealing rivers of souls screaming as they were torn apart by unseen claws. Ghost Rider's hellfire chain burned brighter, feeding off their agony. But instead of consuming them, the flames began to change, deepening, twisting, merging with the chaotic energy around him. And in that moment, something horrifying happened. The warp recognized him. It remembered the concept of vengeance, a force older than chaos, older than gods, and it wanted it back. The fire around Ghost Rider surged, forming shapes, memories, echoes of forgotten daemons who once punished the wicked before the universe lost its light. They whispered to him, "Join us. You are our lost brother. Burn the false gods. Bring judgment to all." Johnny fell to his knees, gripping his skull as the warp tried to rewrite his purpose, to twist his fire into something unholy. For a brief, terrible instant, he saw himself leading legions of daemons, his chain dragging planets into the abyss. But then he heard another voice, faint, buried deep within him, the voice of Zarathos, the true spirit of vengeance bound to his soul. They want to own what cannot be owned. Remember who you are. Johnny roared, his flames erupting with pure, golden fire, not the crimson of chaos, but the righteous burn of divine wrath. The warp recoiled. Daemons screamed as the purity of his vengeance cut through them like sunlight through smoke. In that moment, the spirit of vengeance stood alone in defiance of an entire dimension of madness. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the warp felt fear. When the light faded, Ghost Rider found himself once more upon the battlefield, but everything was different. The Marines were gone. The world was silent. The air shimmered as if reality itself had been scorched. And there, floating before him, was a single sigil burning in the air, the mark of the Inquisition. They had seen his power. They had felt the pulse of that golden fire. And now, the Imperium had declared him a threat to the Emperor's domain. The hunt had begun. They came for him at dawn, though in that world there was no true dawn, only the dim glow of fire through smog. Dropships broke the cloud layer like falling knives, the seal of the Inquisition carved into their hulls. When they landed, the ground shook, and from the smoke marched soldiers clad in black carapace armor. Behind them, a single figure walked slowly, each step measured, as though he were approaching an altar rather than a battlefield. Ghost Rider watched, motionless. The chain at his side smoldered, whispering faint cracks of heat into the cold air. He could have burned them all before they took their second breath, but something about the man leading them made him wait. The figure stopped a few paces away. He removed his helmet and revealed a face carved from resolve and exhaustion. His eyes were hard, but not cruel. "I am Inquisitor Seraphan Vale," he said. "And you, creature, are either the Emperor's miracle or his next trial." Johnny's voice came out low, the fire in his skull dimming to a simmer. "You see a monster and call it faith." Vale studied him, lips twitching into a thin smile. "I see power that should not exist. And in this age, power is either heresy or salvation. Sometimes both." They captured him not with weapons, but with words, prayers woven into chains of psalms, relics humming with psychic energy. Ghost Rider allowed it? He wanted to understand this world before he judged it. Inside the Inquisitor's ship, he was sealed in a chamber of null fields and warding runes. The air reeked of incense and cold metal. Vale entered alone, a small data slate in hand. "You were seen destroying a warp manifestation," Vale said. "Daemons, gone in a single flash of light, not born of the Emperor. Tell me, what are you?" Ghost Rider looked up, the blue fire in his sockets reflecting the Inquisitor's face. "I am vengeance." Vale's fingers tightened on the slate. "Vengeance for whom?" "Everyone who ever suffered and cried for justice." The Inquisitor's tone softened, not from pity, but from awe. "If what you claim is true, then perhaps you are what the Emperor once was." His wrath made flesh. The silence that followed was heavy. The spirit of vengeance could feel the man's mind reaching for meaning, trying to fit him into the tapestry of imperial faith. Yet Ghost Rider knew what Vale could not accept: vengeance answers to no god. Hours passed. Questions turned to confessions. Vale spoke of the Imperium's decay, the tyranny, the blind worship, the way men killed in the Emperor's name but forgot his light. "Maybe," Vale murmured, "we deserve to burn." Ghost Rider leaned forward, chains clinking. "Then you already know your judgment." But before he could act, the ship trembled. The lights died. The air filled with a low, rumbling laughter that was not human. From beyond the hull came a voice, vast, cruel, echoing through the warp itself. "We remember you, Rider. We remember your defiance." Vale staggered. "What is that?" "The ones I refused," Ghost Rider said. "They've come to reclaim what's theirs." Reality cracked. The walls rippled, splitting open into gaping wounds of light. From them poured creatures of chaos, shadows with too many eyes, wings made of teeth, claws dripping with psychic flame. The crew screamed as the ship was swallowed whole. Vale fell to his knees, clutching his rosary. "Emperor, protect us." Ghost Rider's flames exploded outward, melting the chains that held him. "Your Emperor's not coming." He rose, wrapped in an inferno of gold and crimson, his voice booming through the dying ship. "But I am." The Daemons surged forward, but the Rider met them head on. Each swing of his chain tore holes through reality, each crack a hymn of righteous fury. Souls burned clean in his wake. The Inquisitor watched in awe as the warp was pushed back, an impossible sight. When the ship finally stabilized, only ash and silence remained. Vale looked up, trembling, and whispered, "You saved us." Ghost Rider turned his flaming skull toward him. "No, I judged you. You just weren't guilty enough yet." And then, without another word, he vanished, leaving behind a ship adrift among the stars and an Inquisitor forever changed. 4 days afterward, Vale's mind replayed what he had seen. He wrote a single sentence in his report before sealing it away in the deepest archives of Terra. "If this spirit serves vengeance alone, then vengeance may be the Emperor's final mercy." But the warp was not done with the Rider. Across the galaxy, chaos stirred, whispering his name. Somewhere in the darkness, a god of pain and pleasure, smiled, plotting to test this new flame. The next act of vengeance was about to begin. There are places in the galaxy where light itself refuses to linger, where every heartbeat is a war drum echoing in the void. It was in one of those cursed corners of existence deep within the Eye of Terror that the next chapter of vengeance began. In the throne realm of Khurn, the blood god stirred. Rivers of scarlet fire twisted between mountains made of bone, and every drop of blood that fell upon the ground whispered a name the Daemons could not forget: Ghost Rider. Khurn had watched the Rider's defiance against the warp. He had seen the flames burn bright with judgment, untainted by chaos, unshaken by corruption. And in that defiance, Khurn felt something he had not known in millennia: challenge. A warrior who punishes the guilty but kneels to no god. The blood god roared, his voice shaking the crimson skies. Then let him prove his worth in the crucible of slaughter. The command rippled through the warp like a scream. Across a dozen worlds, reality trembled. On the battlefields of the Imperium, where soldiers fought endless wars without meaning, portals began to open, each one spilling blood, haze and rage. And through them came the echoes of Khurn's legions, berserkers clad in brass, their axes humming with the hunger of 10,000 damned souls. They marched with one purpose: to find the Rider. Johnny Blaze had no army. He didn't need one. He stood alone on a desolate world, once an imperial colony, now a wasteland of bones and rust. The sky pulsed with the glow of a dying sun. His fire burned dim, not from weakness, but from restraint. The souls of the guilty were gone from this world. He had judged them all. But when the first horn of Khurn's host sounded, that restraint shattered. The ground split open as Daemon engines crawled through molten soil, their roars mingling with the war cries of the bloodletters. Ghost Rider mounted his hell cycle, its wheels igniting trails of molten stone. The air shuddered as he accelerated toward the horizon, his chain spinning in a circle of flame that cut through the dust like a comet's tail. The first wave hit him like a tidal surge of madness. Axes met chains, screams met fire. Each swing of his weapon shattered Daemons into embers, each burst of hellfire consumed 100 warriors. But for every one that fell, 1,000 more took its place. And above them all, descending like a crimson storm, came a greater Daemon of Khurn, a bloodthirster, towering over the battlefield, its wings wide enough to blot out the burning sky. Mortal fire, face the god of war's fury. Its voice was thunder. Its axe, the size of a drop ship, crashed down upon the Rider with the force of a dying star. The impact carved a crater into the planet's surface. For a moment, all was silence. Then, from the crater's depths, a spark ignited, small, defiant, and impossibly bright. Ghost Rider rose, flames flaring with unholy brilliance. The bloodthirster hesitated, its molten eyes reflecting a light it did not understand, a flame that did not burn for blood, but for judgment. Johnny's voice echoed like the toll of a great bell. You fight for rage. I burn for justice. Let's see which fire lasts longer. The two titans collided again, their battle shaking the planet to its core. Each blow was a symphony of destruction, each roar a hymn to fury and faith. The bloodthirster's blade cut through mountains, Ghost Rider's chain seared through reality itself. As the duel raged on, Khurn watched from his throne of skulls, his laughter booming across the warp. Yes. Yes. This is battle. This is purity. He leaned forward, claws tightening on the armrest. But every fire burns out, little mortal. Let me see if yours does. The bloodthirster unleashed its full power, summoning rivers of burning blood that drowned the land. The air itself became war. But even as the Rider was engulfed, his fire did not fade, it grew. The flames of vengeance are not sustained by victory or hatred. They feed on guilt. And Kern's domain was a bottomless sea of it. Every soul the blood god had claimed, every warrior who had killed without purpose, their sins fueled Johnny's inferno. His voice roared across the battlefield, echoing through both realities. Kern. You call yourself a god of war, but you are nothing but a slave to your own rage. I judge you guilty. For the first time in eternity, Kern's laughter stopped. The bloodthirster faltered. Its axe wavered. Then, before it could strike again, the rider's chain wrapped around its throat, pulling it close. With one blazing motion, Ghost Rider's penance stare flared through the daemon's eyes, filling its mind with every sin it had ever caused, every drop of blood shed in the name of false glory. The creature's scream split the heavens. Its wings disintegrated. Its body collapsed into cinders. From his throne, Kern rose, his roar shaking the foundations of the warp. Enough. But when the smoke cleared, Ghost Rider stood unbroken. His flames burned white, no longer hellfire but something older, something divine. And deep within Kern's own realm, the impossible happened, a single skull upon the mountain of bones turned to ash. For the first time in the history of chaos, a god had lost a fragment of his domain. The blood god's wrath bellowed across the Immaterium, shaking worlds apart, but the rider was gone, vanished into the void between realities. His fire left a scar upon the warp itself, a reminder that there are powers even gods cannot own. And somewhere far beyond the Eye of Terror, within the hidden chambers of the Inquisition, Inquisitor Vale looked up from his reports and whispered. The Emperor's fire walks among the stars. But the Emperor was silent. And the warp was restless. The void between galaxies was silent. No light, no sound, only the whisper of eternity. Ghost Rider drifted through it, his hellfire dimmed to embers. After the war with Kern's legions, even his flame seemed uncertain. For the first time since his damnation, Johnny Blaze did not know if he was still alive, or something else entirely. And yet, there was a pull. A gravity not of stars, but of souls. It drew him across the endless black until the shape of a planet filled his vision, a world bathed in gold, wrapped in the mechanical sprawl of a civilization that worshipped its own decay. Terra. The cradle of mankind. The throne of a god who never died and never spoke. As he descended through the layers of atmosphere, the screams of the damned rose to meet him. Billions of lives weighed down by faith and fear, all praying to a silent emperor whose corpse sat entombed upon a throne of machinery. Ghost Rider could feel it, the guilt of a species pressed into one spot. It was intoxicating. He landed in the shadow of the Imperial Palace, his hell cycle's wheels carving molten trails through the marble of the sanctum. The custodes were waiting. Golden giants, living statues of devotion and violence. Their leader stepped forward, spear raised. Identify yourself, abomination. Ghost Rider's voice echoed against the walls of the sacred citadel. I am vengeance. And I have come to judge your god. The custodes didn't hesitate. They attacked as one. Blades of auramite clashed against chains of burning steel. Each strike was like thunder, each parry like the grinding of titans. They fought with devotion, he fought with purpose. But the rider didn't kill them. He could see the truth in their eyes, loyalty without question, faith without understanding. Their guilt wasn't malice, it was obedience. So he burned not their flesh, but their lies. His penance stare washed over them, showing each warrior the hollow prayers they had whispered for centuries. Some fell to their knees in silence, others screamed as their certainty crumbled. When the last blade fell, a voice spoke not from any throat, but from everywhere at once. You would judge me, spirit. The sound froze the air. Even the flames on Johnny's skull flickered. The throne room's doors opened, and a wave of psychic force blasted outward. The Emperor's presence, faint but undeniable, rolled through the air like the breath of creation. Ghost Rider stepped inside. The light was blinding, golden, and terrible. The figure on the throne did not move, but the energy that emanated from him was infinite, a son of will and agony. You are far from home, the voice said. You burn with judgment, yet you do not understand the weight of eternity. Johnny stood his ground. I've seen hell. I've burned it, fought it, and walked its edge. And I see the same thing here, a god feeding on the suffering of the innocent. The Emperor's tone deepened, like thunder wrapped in sorrow. Without suffering, there is no survival. Without sacrifice, mankind is nothing. Ghost Rider's chain cracked through the air, sparking fire across the floor. No. Without guilt, you have no power. You've become what you once fought, a parasite on the faith of the dying. For a moment, the throne's light dimmed. The flames on Johnny's skull flared brighter. He raised his gaze to the Emperor's golden form. I came here because every soul in this galaxy screams for justice. I thought I'd find it here. But all I see is another sinner hiding behind salvation. The silence that followed was unbearable. Then unexpectedly the Emperor spoke, not with rage, but with sorrow. Then do it. Judge me. Johnny hesitated. He had burned demons, angels, even gods. But this was different. The Emperor's guilt was infinite, a weight of 10,000 years of sacrifice, betrayal, and unending war. To burn that guilt was to burn the foundation of mankind itself. He stepped closer, fire dancing across the golden throne. The custodes dared not move. Ghost Rider's eyes blazed with the fury of creation. You kept humanity alive. But at what cost? At the cost of myself, the Emperor whispered. And in that moment, Johnny saw the truth. The Emperor's soul, trapped between godhood and decay, chained to a throne that devoured him day by day. He was not evil. He was simply tired. The rider's flames flickered. For the first time, his judgment faltered. The penance stare dimmed. You don't need punishment, Johnny said quietly. You need rest. And then he did the unthinkable. He reached out, placed a burning hand upon the Emperor's gauntlet, and whispered. Be free. The fire spread not to destroy, but to release. It flowed through the machinery, through the throne, through the endless web of psychic chains holding the Emperor to his torment. The palace shook. The Astronomicon flared. Across the galaxy, psychers screamed as the golden light of Terra became a sun once more. The Emperor's form glowed, brighter and brighter, until all that remained was a voice carried on the wind. Thank you, Spirit of Vengeance. When the light faded, the throne was empty. The chains were gone. And Ghost Rider stood alone, his flames now dim and white, like dying embers. The galaxy went silent. No warp storms. No demonic whispers. Just the quiet aftermath of an impossible act. Johnny turned toward the broken doors of the palace. Maybe, he said to the empty air, some fires are meant to burn out. He mounted his cycle, the sound of its engine echoing across the silent halls of humanity's greatest tomb. Then, without another word, he rode into the stars, leaving behind a world free, but trembling, uncertain of what to worship next. In the void, a whisper followed him, neither divine nor damned. Even gods must face judgment. The galaxy was quiet for the first time in 10,000 years. Too quiet. The Astronomicon, the great psychic beacon that had guided ships across the warp, was gone. The Emperor was gone. And in that absence, there was a stillness so vast that even chaos itself hesitated to breathe. Ghost Rider drifted through that silence, his hellfire now pale and cold. The stars around him seemed closer, sharper, as if the universe itself was watching him. He could feel it, every soul, every mind, every fragment of the Imperium struggling to understand what had happened. Without their god, their faith trembled. Armies that had fought for millennia stopped mid-battle. Ships stood still between worlds. The ecclesiarchy screamed blasphemy, the Inquisition wept, and the Adeptus Astartes fell to their knees, not knowing whether to pray or curse. Johnny Blaze had done what no daemon, no primarch, no god could do. He had freed the Emperor. But with freedom came consequence. For in the warp's depths, the gods stirred again. Kern raged, roaring for vengeance of his own. Xiange laughed, delighted at the chaos now unbound. Slaanesh sighed, savoring the despair of a faithless galaxy. And deep beneath them all, Nurgle smiled a patient, festering contentment. But something else had awakened. The flame that Ghost Rider had released upon Terra did not fade. It spread slowly, invisibly through the psychic void like a contagion of light. Worlds that had known only darkness began to glow faintly in the night sky. Souls that had lived and died under tyranny felt, for the first time, the stirring of something dangerous, hope. And the warp hated it. Johnny's flames flared once more, sensing the shift. The warp began to recoil, twisting, bending, trying to swallow him again. But this time, it was not the rider who was out of place, it was the warp itself. "You've broken the balance," whispered a voice, echoing from every direction. A figure emerged from the void, cloaked in ever-changing colors, eyes like galaxies collapsing into themselves. Xiange, the architect of fate. "You've undone 10 millennia of divine equilibrium," the god said. "Do you understand what you've done, little flame?" Ghost Rider's chain snapped once, a ripple of white fire crossing the emptiness. "I set a man free. The rest is not my concern." Xiange smiled a terrible, knowing grin. "Everything is your concern now. Without the Emperor's will, the warp will flood the stars. You have not saved mankind. You have unleashed it." The rider tilted his skull, flames flickering like a dying candle. "Then I'll burn whatever comes." Xiange's laughter echoed as he vanished into smoke. But the words lingered, heavy as fate. Ghost Rider turned his gaze toward the nearest star, its surface trembling with new life. Planets below flickered with chaos and rebellion. Inquisitors hunted priests. Space Marines divided, each legion interpreting the Emperor's silence in their own way. Some claimed his spirit had ascended. Others said vengeance itself had replaced divinity. And then the rumors began. Across 1,000 worlds, witnesses spoke of a figure wreathed in fire, appearing where the innocent were slaughtered, where corruption festered unchecked. The faithful began to whisper a new name, the Burning Saint. The heretics called him the White Flame of Damnation. But all knew the same truth: the spirit of vengeance walked among them still. Johnny felt their prayers like sparks against his soul. They did not pray for mercy, nor salvation. They prayed for justice. "You see, Blaze," came a voice deep within him, the old, rumbling growl of Zarathos, the demon spirit that shared his soul. "You've become the very thing you swore to destroy. They worship you." "I didn't ask for worship," Johnny muttered. "No," Zarathos hissed, "but it will find you all the same. Every fire becomes a beacon. Every beacon becomes a throne. The words burned in his mind as he rode through the void. Every world he passed called out for vengeance. Every life lost demanded a reckoning. His flames responded not out of will, but instinct. They were no longer his to control. He had freed the emperor. He had broken the chains of gods. But now, the galaxy itself was forging new ones around him. He landed on a dead world, once an imperial forge planet, now silent. His footsteps echoed through the ruins of cathedrals built for a god who no longer ruled. In the shattered stained glass, he saw his reflection. The skull still burned, but beneath the flame, he saw something worse. He saw faith. And in that moment, Ghost Rider understood the truth of vengeance. It doesn't end when justice is done. It endures, waiting for the next sin, the next scream, the next plea. It cannot die. It cannot rest. He looked up at the sky, where the warp shimmered like a wound. You can't cage fire, he said. And you can't worship it, either. But somewhere, deep within the Immaterium, something laughed softly, a voice that might have been the Emperor's, or something far older. We'll see. Ghost Rider mounted his cycle again, the white fire burning bright against the eternal dark. He rode onward, into a galaxy without gods, without kings, without peace, only guilt and flame. A new age had begun. The age of unchained fire. You said. In the black sea of stars, Ghost Rider's flame had become a rumor that refused to die. Wherever his fire touched, the warp buckled and bent, reshaping itself into something it did not understand. For the first time since the dawn of the Chaos Gods, a new power was being born, not of desire, not of hunger, but of guilt and reckoning. The Daemons whispered a new name for it. Not a god of pleasure, or of war, or of decay. A god of justice, cold, merciless, inevitable. And like all things in the warp, belief gave it life. Across countless worlds, mortals began to pray not for salvation, not for victory, but for vengeance. In the dark corners of hive cities, the desperate chanted the rider's name. In the trenches of dying wars, soldiers lit makeshift candles, whispering pleas for their enemies to burn. And far out in the void, psychers began to dream of a flaming skull staring at them through the walls of reality. The warp responded. Where once it had been a storm of chaos and emotion, new patterns began to emerge. Waves of purging fire rolled across the Immaterium, consuming daemons, erasing entire currents of corruption. Kern's rage faltered. Slaanish's ecstasy curdled into terror. Xiancha's schemes burned before they could unfold. And at the heart of it all, Ghost Rider felt the weight of a billion souls pressing upon him. Every prayer, every scream for vengeance, every whispered curse, they flowed into his fire, feeding it until the flames no longer obeyed his will. Zarathos, the demon within, spoke again, its tone less mocking now, almost afraid. You feel it too, don't you? They're making you into something else. Something eternal. Johnny's voice was hollow, cracking through the silence. I'm not their god. Tell them that, Zarathos snarled. Tell the ones who've built altars in your name. Tell the souls who think your fire will cleanse them. They'll never listen. He looked down at his hands, the chains coiled like serpents of molten light. The fire danced, shifting color, no longer the orange of hellfire, nor the white of purity, but something darker and deeper, a hue that pulsed like a living heart. He realized what the warp was trying to do. It was making room for him. A fifth throne was forming among the eternal hells, a seat of burning judgment. And it waited for him to sit upon it. The gods of chaos gathered, for the first time in eons, to witness the birth of their rival. Kern roared from his citadel of skulls. No mortal wears the crown of wrath but me. Xianch whispered through galaxies of madness, let him rise, he will be my undoing and my design alike. Slaanesh smiled, dripping honey and venom. Justice and sin are siblings, my dear brothers. Let the fire show us which burns brighter. Nurgle chuckled, voice thick with decay. Even vengeance rots in time. And from the churning void, a voice rose, not divine, not demonic, but human. The combined prayers of trillions cried out for punishment, for balance, for fire. Ghost Rider fell to his knees, clutching his skull as the pressure built. The warp folded inward around him, streams of molten light wrapping him in cosmic chains. Every sin ever committed by mankind screamed through his mind, the betrayals, the murders, the wars, the lies. It was too much. He roared, his voice cracking the veil between realms. I am not your god. The fire erupted outward, a supernova of wrath. Daemons burned. Planets trembled. Even the stars recoiled. The fifth throne shattered into fragments of molten light that scattered across creation. When the flames died down, Ghost Rider stood alone in the void, trembling, his body cracked with light. The warp was silent. The gods watched, wary. Zarathus spoke softly. You broke the cycle. Johnny looked up at the shattered thrones. No one should rule over pain. The demon inside him almost smiled. Then what are you now? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The chains uncoiled, glowing faintly in the void. For the first time in all existence, the warp was unsure of what it had made. And then, somewhere far away in the depths of real space, humans began to feel it. Not faith, not fear, but conscience. Soldiers hesitated before pulling triggers. Inquisitors looked upon their heretics and saw people, not monsters. Astartes whispered old names, remembering they had once been men. The spirit of vengeance had done something no god had ever managed. He had made the galaxy feel guilt again. The balance had shifted. But peace would not come. Because vengeance, once set free, cannot fade, it only waits. Johnny Blaze, the Ghost Rider, looked toward the stars one last time. His voice was quiet, but it carried through both reality and the warp. If there's still sin in the dark, then so am I. He turned his bike toward the infinite horizon, the flames of justice trailing behind him like a scar across eternity. No heaven, no hell, only the endless road. And so the spirit rode on, not as a god, not as a daemon, but as the one thing the universe could never kill, the fire that remembers. What happens when vengeance outlives its purpose? It had been centuries since the firestorm that tore through the warp. The galaxy had changed slowly, painfully, like a wounded beast learning to breathe again. The Emperor's throne remained empty, a relic of a faith that no longer had a voice. The Chaos gods still lingered, fractured and watchful, each weakened but alive. And between them all, drifting like a ghost of fire and smoke, rode the spirit who had once been a man. Johnny Blaze. The Ghost Rider. He no longer burned with the furious glow of damnation. His fire had dimmed to an ember, soft, steady, patient. The roar of his engine was now a whisper carried on solar winds. He had seen empires crumble and rise again, each one claiming to have learned from the old world, each one destined to repeat it. He had become something no daemon, god, or man could name. Not savior. Not destroyer. Just witness. And yet, even in this quiet eternity, he felt it again, the stir of corruption. Somewhere on the edge of the galaxy, far from the ruins of Terra, a new empire was rising. Built on old lies, speaking the same words of purity and righteousness. The same fire he had once burned to cleanse. He stopped his bike atop the corpse of a dying world, its crust shattered and glowing like embered coal. He stared into the void for what might have been years. And then he spoke, voice low, tired, but unbroken. They never learn. The air shimmered. A familiar voice, rough, deep, ancient, spoke from within his skull. You could end it again, said Zarathos. Burn it all. Erase the slate. Isn't that what vengeance is for? Johnny's flames flickered faintly. It's not about ending. It's about remembering. You've changed, the demon murmured. I had to. Silence. Then, for the first time in millennia, Zarathos laughed. Not cruelly, but softly, almost human. Then maybe we both did. The rider said nothing. The galaxy spun beneath him, endless and cold. But as he watched, something began to stir below, the faint shimmer of blue fire blooming across the planet's surface. Not destruction. Not war. It was light. People gathering, holding small candles, telling stories of the rider who came when justice was gone. They didn't pray to him. They remembered him. And that was enough. Johnny felt the weight lift, as if the galaxy itself had finally exhaled. His chains loosened, falling silent. The fire around his skull dimmed until only a faint glow remained in his eye sockets, a reflection of distant stars. For the first time in ages, he felt something he had forgotten how to feel. Peace. Is this it? Zarathos asked quietly. The end of vengeance. Johnny shook his head. Vengeance doesn't end. It just finds someone else to carry it. He looked one last time across the stars, the endless wars, the prayers, the hope, the ruin. A universe caught forever between damnation and redemption. Then he smiled. Guess my shift's over. He revved the engine once, and the sound rolled through the void like thunder. The flames on his wheels turned pale gold, fading as he accelerated toward the horizon. Faster and faster until his light stretched thin, dissolving into the endless dark. For a moment, the galaxy was silent. Then, from the depths of the warp, a spark ignited, small, flickering, human. Somewhere, a soul cried out for justice. And far away, in that infinite black, something answered. A faint rumble. The echo of a chain. The whisper of a flame. Because vengeance never dies. Do you hear it? That faint hum in the dark between stars, the whisper of a fire that shouldn't exist. 10,000 years had passed since the rider vanished into the void. To most of the galaxy, he was a myth. To the ecclesiarchy's new sermons, he was a heresy. And to the broken remnants of the chaos gods, he was a wound that had never healed. But the warp never forgets. It remembers everything. There, in the tides of madness and faith, the rider's essence still lingered, a ghost of flame drifting through the Immaterium. Every so often, when the universe trembled with injustice, the ember flickered. When a tyrant killed without cause, the flame stirred. When a mother died protecting her child, the flame roared. Until, one day, the galaxy burned again. It began on a world called Viharn 9, a planet long lost to chaos and despair. There, the cult of Endless Dawn had risen, promising salvation through obedience. They built cities of steel and chains, where the weak were broken for the greater good. They called their leader the Pure King, a man wrapped in light, his voice soft and poisonous. But the warp saw through him. And so did the flame. It started small, a flicker in the sky, like lightning that never faded. Then came the heat, sweeping through the cathedrals and forges, turning idols of false light into molten ruin. And when the first scream echoed across the capital, the people looked up and saw it. A silhouette, riding through the clouds, its wheels burning brighter than suns. Chains of molten judgment snapping through the air. The skull aflame, the eyes hollow, merciless. The rider had returned. But this was not Johnny Blaze. This was something new. From the ashes of memory and faith, from the prayers of the oppressed, from the guilt of an entire species, the fire had found another vessel. A woman this time. Her name was forgotten by history, erased by the pure king's decree. But her soul burned with fury so deep that even the warp bowed to it. The spirit of vengeance had chosen again. She stood amidst the burning ruins, her voice echoing through the city. No more gods. No more kings. Only the fire. The cult's armies turned their weapons upon her, but their bullets melted mid-flight. The chains struck out, tearing through machines and lies alike. And when she reached the pure king, she did not judge him with words. She simply stared into his soul. He screamed for forgiveness. The flame gave none. In that instant, Vihar 9 became a beacon, a world aflame, but pure, free of tyranny. And across the stars, billions felt it again, that same guilt, that same shiver of awe. The legend had returned. Not as a man, but as a force. The warp trembled. The chaos gods watched in silence. Kern whispered, "It cannot be killed." Xianj murmured, "It was never meant to die." Slaanesh smiled. "Perhaps vengeance is the truest pleasure." Nurgle only sighed. Even rot must burn, in time. And in the quiet heart of the void, something like a laugh echoed, a sound that might have belonged to Johnny Blaze. "Told you it never ends." The new rider, nameless and fierce, rode on through the stars. Her fire burned blue-white, leaving trails of light across space. She didn't serve heaven or hell, man or God. She was simply the answer. Every injustice, every unpunished sin, every forgotten crime. She would find them all. And somewhere, deep within the warp, the broken thrones of chaos flickered uneasily. For they knew, if this flame kept spreading, if it continued to awaken the conscience of the galaxy, then even they could die. A new age had begun again. The age of reckoning. And in the eternal silence between worlds, the voice of the rider whispered to all who would listen. "Run, if you must. But fire always finds you." What happens when there's no more evil left to burn? The stars were dim now, ancient, flickering like dying candles in an ocean of black. Whole civilizations had risen and fallen beneath the shadow of the rider's flame. Empires built on blood had turned to dust. The warp itself, once a storm of chaos and hate, had grown eerily calm. There was no laughter of daemons. No whispers of temptation. No screams of war. Only silence. The spirit of vengeance, now eternal, beyond form or flesh, rode through that stillness. Her fire no longer blazed in fury, it pulsed like a heartbeat, slow and steady. Every chain she carried was quiet. Every sin she once hunted had been judged, one by one, until only peace remained. And yet, the flame did not die. She found herself wandering the remnants of forgotten worlds, ashes of once mighty cities, bones of titans buried beneath time. There was no one left to save. No one left to punish. The universe had gone cold, clean, and empty. For the first time since the dawn of her fire, the rider felt something she had never known before. Emptiness. A voice stirred within her, the echo of all who had come before. Johnny Blaze. Zarathos. the countless souls who had carried the flame through eternity. You did it, the voice said softly. You won. She said nothing. Her skull tilted toward the horizon, where even the stars had gone out. So why are you still here? The voice asked. The rider's flame flickered faintly. Because I don't know what comes after justice. Silence answered her. Then, faintly, a whisper. Maybe this is what comes after. She looked down. Her fire, once searing white and pure, had begun to cool to gold, then to ember, then to something softer still. The chains around her arms turned to light, unraveling like threads in the wind. And for the first time in eternity, she felt warmth. Not the fury of vengeance, not the pain of guilt, but warmth. She saw their faces then, every soul she had judged, every sinner she had burned, every innocent she had avenged. They stood before her, not in fire, but in light. No fear, no anger, only understanding. They reached for her, and the rider felt the fire within her chest pulse one last time. She understood. Vengeance had never been about destruction. It had always been the path to forgiveness. She smiled, a gesture unseen for eons. And then she let go. The flame lifted from her skull, rising into the void like a sunrise. It spread outward, soft and endless, touching every corner of creation. The last fires of wrath became the first fires of renewal. Stars were born again, brighter than before. The warp shimmered, no longer a sea of chaos but a living mirror of light. And in that moment, the spirit of vengeance finally found peace. Her voice, faint as starlight, echoed through the newborn cosmos. Justice is done. The flame faded. The bike's engine went silent. The chains dissolved. Where the rider had been, there was only light. And in that light, the universe began again. A single spark drifted away, whispering through time, waiting for the next world, the next life, the next sin. Because though peace had come, eternity has a way of circling back. And someday, somewhere, someone will call out in the dark. And the flame will answer. Because vengeance never dies. It only sleeps.